In the small town of Willow Creek, life revolved around perfection. The streets were lined with charming houses, each one more beautiful than the last. Every lawn was trimmed to precision, every flower bed arranged just so. It wasn't just pride that kept everything looking perfect. It was the Homeowners Association, HOA. The HOA ruled the neighborhood like a silent but ever-present force, ensuring that no one stepped out of line. Their rules covered almost everything: how tall your grass could grow, what color your front door should be, and even when you were allowed to put up holiday decorations. Dr. Emily Carter had always dreamed of living in such a peaceful place. As a pediatrician at the local hospital and a single mother raising her teenage son, Alex, she wanted nothing more than a safe and quiet environment for her family. When she finally bought her dream home on Maple Lane, a cozy two-story house with a white picket fence, she thought all her worries were behind her. But little did she know, moving to Willow Creek would bring challenges she never anticipated. First, things seemed idyllic. Her neighbors greeted her warmly whenever they passed by, complimenting her garden or asking about Alex's school activities. Dr. Carter quickly settled into her routine, balancing long shifts at the hospital with quality time at home. She joined the HOA meetings occasionally, hoping to get involved in community events and make friends. However, it didn't take long for her to realize that not everything in Willow Creek was as picture-perfect as it appeared. The HOA had an iron grip over residents' lives. They sent out weekly emails reminding everyone of the rules, and heaven forbid if anyone broke them. One day, Dr. Carter received a formal letter from the HOA informing her that her mailbox was non-compliant because its shade of blue didn't match the approved palette. Another time, she got a warning for putting up string lights along her porch railing too early in December. While these infractions might have seemed minor to some, they irritated Dr. Carter. To her, they felt unnecessary and controlling. But those were just the beginning. Over time, the HOA's demands grew increasingly absurd. Neighbors whispered stories of fines slapped on people who parked their cars in their driveways overnight or hung clothes outside to dry instead of using a dryer. Some claimed the HOA even monitored garbage bins to ensure no one left them out longer than permitted. These tales sounded exaggerated, but Dr. Carter couldn't dismiss them entirely. After all, she'd seen firsthand how seriously the HOA took its job. Despite her frustration, Dr. Carter tried to stay positive. She figured that as long as she followed the rules, or at least most of them, she wouldn't have any real problems. Besides, she had bigger priorities. Between her demanding career and raising Alex, she didn't have much energy left to fight petty battles with the HOA. Still, there were moments when she wondered if this obsession with perfection came at a cost. Wasn't it possible to live harmoniously without micromanaging every detail? Alex, meanwhile, adapted well to their new surroundings. He made friends easily and enjoyed playing basketball with the neighborhood kids after school. But he also noticed something odd about Willow Creek. "Mom," he said one evening during dinner, "why does Mr. Peterson walk around with a clipboard? And why does Mrs. Dawson glare at us when we leave our shoes by the door?" Dr. Carter chuckled at his observations but couldn't deny the truth behind them. The HOA's influence extended beyond mere rule enforcement. It created an atmosphere of constant surveillance and judgment. As months went by, tensions between Dr. Carter and the HOA began to simmer beneath the surface. What started as mild annoyance slowly turned into resentment. She found herself questioning whether this neighborhood truly valued harmony or simply conformity, yet she held her tongue, believing that speaking out might only invite further trouble. Little did she know, the worst was yet to come. One crisp autumn afternoon, while Dr. Carter was tending to patients at the hospital, a series of events unfolded back home that would shatter the illusion of peace in Willow Creek. Unbeknownst to her, the HOA's fixation on control was about to reach a breaking point, one that would involve emergency responders, shocking behavior, and consequences far greater than anyone could have imagined. For now, though, life continued as usual. Dr. Carter returned home late that evening, unaware that her world, and the world of everyone else in Willow Creek, was about to change forever. The calm before the storm lingered, masking the chaos that lay ahead. And though the neighborhood still looked pristine under the glow of streetlights, cracks were forming beneath its polished surface, waiting to burst open. It was a typical autumn evening in Willow Creek, with the air crisp and cool, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves. Dr. Emily Carter had just finished her shift at the hospital when her phone buzzed on the passenger seat of her car. The caller ID showed it was from the emergency department, a call she couldn't ignore. On the other end, a nurse explained that a young patient, barely 6 years old, had been rushed in with severe breathing difficulties. The child's condition was worsening rapidly, and they needed Dr. Carter's expertise immediately. Without hesitation, Dr. Carter turned her car around and headed back toward the hospital. Her mind raced as she thought about the little boy fighting for his life. She knew how delicate these situations could be, especially when dealing with children. As a pediatrician, she had seen her share of emergencies, but each one felt like the first, urgent, critical, and deeply personal. She pushed aside thoughts of anything else, focusing solely on what lay ahead. Meanwhile, back at home, Alex, her teenage son, was settling into his usual routine. He had spent the afternoon playing video games and texting friends, enjoying the quiet solitude of their house. But as the evening wore on, he realized something troubling. He had locked himself out of the house. In his haste to grab a basketball from the garage earlier, he'd accidentally left his phone inside and hadn't brought his keys. Now standing on the front porch in the dim light of the setting sun, Alex sighed in frustration. He debated calling his mom but hesitated. Dr. Carter had already mentioned she might be tied up at work tonight, and he didn't want to bother her over something as trivial as being locked out. After all, it wasn't the first time this had happened. Alex figured he could simply wait until she returned. It wasn't cold outside, and he had his hoodie to keep him comfortable. So, he sat down on the wooden steps of their porch, leaned back against the railing, and pulled out his earbuds to listen to music while he waited. Unbeknownst to Alex, his presence on the porch would soon become the center of attention. Not because of anything he did, but because of how others chose to interpret it. A few houses down, Mrs. Peterson, a nosy neighbor known for her clipboard and eagle-eyed observations, happened to glance out her window. When she spotted Alex sitting alone outside, her curiosity piqued. At first, she assumed nothing unusual was going on. Kids often hung out on porches or played in driveways. But then doubt crept in. Why was he sitting there so quietly? Where were his parents? And why did he look unattended? Mrs. Peterson wrestled with her thoughts for a moment before deciding to act. Convinced that something must be wrong, she picked up her phone and dialed 911. Her voice trembled slightly as she reported seeing a neglected child sitting alone outside a house. She described the scene in vivid detail, emphasizing how late it was getting and how vulnerable the boy appeared. Though she didn't mention names, the address she provided matched Dr. Carter's home perfectly. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights illuminated Maple Lane as an ambulance and police cruiser pulled up in front of the Carters' house. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, whispering among themselves about what might be happening. Word traveled fast in Willow Creek and speculation ran wild. Some assumed there had been a burglary, while others wondered if someone inside the house was hurt. No one suspected the truth, that a simple misunderstanding was about to spiral out of control. When paramedics approached Alex, they found him calm and relaxed, headphones still in place. Startled by their arrival, he removed his earbuds and blinked at them in confusion. "Is everything okay?" he asked, rising to his feet. The paramedics exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of the situation. One of them knelt down to speak with him gently. "Hey, buddy," he said. "We got a call saying you might need help. Are you all right?" Alex nodded, explaining that he had accidentally locked himself out of the house and was waiting for his mom to come home. He pointed to the door, assuring them that his phone and keys were inside, and added that his mom was probably still at work. To the paramedics, this explanation made perfect sense. Kids forgot things sometimes. It happened all the time. They assured Alex that everything was fine and offered to stay with him until his mom arrived. But just as things seemed to settle, Another car screeched to a halt near the scene. Out stepped Mr. Dawson, the president of the HOA, flanked by two other board members. Their faces were grim, their expressions unreadable. Mr. Dawson marched up to the paramedics, demanding to know what was going on. His tone was authoritative, almost accusatory, as if he believed the emergency responders were intruding on private property without proper cause. The paramedics tried to explain the situation calmly, but Mr. Dawson wasn't satisfied. He insisted that the HOA should have been notified before anyone called 911. "This is our neighborhood," he declared, puffing out his chest. "We handle matters internally." His words sparked a heated argument between him and one of the paramedics, who reminded him that their job was to respond to emergencies regardless of neighborhood politics. Tensions escalated quickly. Voices rose and gestures grew more animated. That's when things took a shocking turn. Another HOA member, visibly agitated by the commotion, reached into her purse and pulled out a taser, a device she claimed to carry for self-defense. Before anyone could react, she fired it at the paramedic who had been arguing with Mr. Mark Dawson. The crackling sound of electricity filled the air as the paramedic collapsed to the ground, stunned and disoriented. For a moment, silence fell over Maple Lane. Everyone stared in disbelief at the scene unfolding before them. Alex stood frozen, unsure of what to do or say. The other paramedics rushed to assist their colleague, shouting for someone to call the police. Neighbors who had gathered to watch the drama gasped in horror, some covering their mouths in shock. What had started as a minor mix-up had spiraled into chaos, leaving everyone shaken and confused. By the time Dr. Carter returned home later that night, the street was eerily quiet again. The ambulances and police cars were gone, but the remnants of the incident lingered in the air. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered softly in the breeze, and a few neighbors lingered outside, talking in hushed tones. As Dr. Carter stepped out of her car, she immediately sensed that something was terribly wrong. Her heart sank as she saw Alex sitting on the porch, pale and wide-eyed, clutching his knees to his chest. "Mom," he said weakly, his voice trembling. Something happened. And as he recounted the events of the evening, Dr. Carter struggled to process the absurdity of it all. How could a simple mistake, locking oneself out of the house, lead to such a bizarre and dangerous confrontation? More importantly, what did this say about the community she had once admired? As the weight of the situation settled over her, Dr. Carter realized that this was far from over. The HOA's actions, or rather overreactions, had crossed a line, and the consequences would ripple far beyond Willow Creek. For now, though, her priority was comforting Alex and ensuring he felt safe. Tomorrow she would face the fallout head-on. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that her family, and perhaps the entire neighborhood, was standing on the brink of something much bigger than any of them could have anticipated. When Dr. Emily Carter finally heard Alex's account of the evening, her blood ran cold. She listened intently as he recounted every detail, the paramedics arriving, the heated argument with Mr. Dawson and the other HOA members, and the unthinkable moment when one of them used a taser on an emergency responder. Each word painted a picture so surreal that it felt like something out of a movie, not real life. But the evidence was undeniable. Her quiet suburban neighborhood had just become the stage for an incident that defied logic. Dr. Carter's mind raced as she tried to piece together what had happened. Why would someone call 911 over a locked-out teenager who was clearly unharmed? And why did the HOA feel entitled to intervene in a situation that should have been handled by professionals? The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. This wasn't just negligence, it was a gross abuse of power. Her son had done nothing wrong. He'd simply made a harmless mistake. And yet, his presence on the porch had somehow triggered a chain reaction that ended with violence. The next morning, news of the incident spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, sharing snippets of information they'd overheard or pieced together themselves. Some were horrified by the HOA's actions, while others defended them, insisting that the board was only trying to protect the community. Social media lit up with posts dissecting the event, some sympathetic to Dr. Carter and Alex, others critical of their supposed negligence. Before long, local reporters caught wind of the story, descending upon Maple Lane like vultures circling prey. By midday, news vans lined the street, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. Reporters knocked on doors, thrusting microphones toward bewildered residents. "What do you think about the HOA's involvement?" one asked Mrs. Peterson, whose original 911 call had set everything in motion. Flustered and defensive, she stammered, "I was just concerned about the boy. You can't blame me for wanting to keep our neighborhood safe." Her words did little to quell the growing controversy. Amidst the chaos, Dr. Carter decided to address the public directly. She stood on her porch, flanked by Alex, and spoke calmly but firmly into a cluster of cameras and recorders. "My son is fine," she began, her voice steady despite the storm swirling around her. "But what happened here last night was unacceptable. Emergency responders came to help, and instead of allowing them to do their jobs, certain individuals took matters into their own hands, hands that shouldn't have been involved in the first place." Her statement struck a chord with many, especially those who had grown tired of the HOA's heavy-handed tactics. For years, residents had grumbled privately about the organization's obsessive enforcement of trivial rules, but now, the cracks in its facade were impossible to ignore. People began questioning whether the HOA truly represented the best interests of Willow Creek, or if it had morphed into something far darker. As the day wore on, tensions escalated further. Federal investigators arrived, tasked with determining whether any laws had been broken during the altercation. They questioned witnesses, reviewed security footage from nearby homes, and examined the HOA's records for signs of misconduct. Meanwhile, lawyers representing both sides scrambled to prepare for what promised to be a high-stakes legal battle. Dr. Carter retained counsel, filing a formal complaint against the HOA for emotional distress, defamation, and endangerment of her family. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Back at the HOA headquarters, a modest office tucked away in a strip mall on the outskirts of town, the atmosphere was tense. Board members gathered for an emergency meeting, their faces pale and drawn. Mr. Dawson paced back and forth, muttering under his breath about how this whole thing has been blown out of proportion. Others sat silently, avoiding eye contact, unsure of what to say or do. One member, visibly shaken, suggested issuing a public apology, but Mr. Dawson shot down the idea immediately. "We're not backing down," he snapped. "We were protecting this neighborhood." Despite their bravado, cracks began to form within the HOA itself. Anonymous tip-offs started pouring in, revealing secrets that painted an even uglier picture of the organization's inner workings. Former members came forward, alleging years of bullying, intimidation, and unethical behavior. One whistleblower claimed the HOA kept secret files on every resident, documenting personal grievances and perceived slights. Another accused the board of using fines as a way to punish dissenters and silence critics. These revelations fueled public outrage, turning the scandal into a national spectacle. For Dr. Carter, the days that followed were a blur of interviews, meetings, and sleepless nights. She fielded calls from reporters eager to hear her side of the story, while also navigating the emotional toll the incident had taken on Alex. He barely spoke, retreating into himself as the weight of the media attention bore down on him. Friends at school teased him mercilessly, calling him the kid who got tased, even though he hadn't actually been tased. Dr. Carter did her best to shield him from the fallout, but it was clear that the damage went deeper than she could fix alone. In the midst of all this, Dr. Carter found herself reflecting on the nature of control and the cost of perfection. Willow Creek had always prided itself on being a model community, a place where order reigned supreme. But at what expense? The HOA's relentless pursuit of uniformity had created an environment where fear, rather than trust, governed people's actions. Neighbors spied on each other, reporting minor infractions to curry favor with the board. Rules replaced relationships, and paranoia replaced peace. It was no wonder that such a seemingly small issue, a locked-out teenager, could spiral into something so explosive. Yet amid the turmoil there were glimmers of hope. Some residents began speaking out against the HOA, demanding accountability and reform. A petition circulated online, urging the dissolution of the current board and the establishment of a new, more democratic system of governance. Even Mrs. Peterson, whose initial 911 call had sparked the entire ordeal, expressed regret in a televised interview. "I never meant for things to go this far," she admitted tearfully. "I thought I was doing the right thing." As the investigation unfolded, federal authorities uncovered disturbing patterns of behavior within the HOA. Emails revealed discussions about targeting specific households for arbitrary rule violations, while financial records hinted at mismanagement of funds. The evidence painted a damning portrait of an organization that had lost sight of its original purpose, to foster harmony within the community. Instead, it had become a tool of oppression, wielding power indiscriminately and without regard for human decency. Despite the mounting pressure, the HOA refused to back down entirely. In a defiant press release, Mr. Dawson insisted that the board's actions were justified given the circumstances. "We are the guardians of this neighborhood," he wrote. "If we didn't step in, who knows what might have happened." His words fell flat, however, as more details emerged exposing the absurdity of the situation. Critics lambasted the HOA for its reckless decision-making, labeling it a cautionary tale of unchecked authority. For Dr. Carter, the fight was far from over. While she appreciated the support pouring in from across the country, she knew that true justice wouldn't come easily. The lawsuit she filed was just the beginning, a means of holding the HOA accountable for its actions and ensuring that no family ever faced such a nightmare again. But beyond the legal battle lay a larger question. Could Willow Creek recover from this? Could its residents rebuild trust and move forward together? As the sun set on another chaotic day, Dr. Carter sat on her porch with Alex, watching the shadows lengthen across their yard. The air was thick with uncertainty, but also with possibility. Change often comes from moments of crisis, and perhaps this was Willow Creek's chance to redefine itself, not as a place ruled by fear, but as a community united by compassion. Whatever lay ahead, Dr. Carter vowed to face it head-on, determined to protect her family and fight for a better future. The fallout from the shocking incident on Maple Lane rippled through Willow Creek like a tidal wave, leaving no corner of the community untouched. What had once been a quiet, picture-perfect suburb was now at the center of a national scandal, with headlines splashed across newspapers and TV segments dissecting every detail. Residents found themselves divided, some rallying behind Dr. Emily Carter and her family, others doubling down in support of the HOA. The tension in the air was palpable, as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. For Dr. Carter, the days following the incident were a whirlwind of emotions. She tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Alex's sake, but it was nearly impossible. Reporters camped outside their home day and night, eager for any comment or reaction. Strangers stopped her in the grocery store, offering condolences or unsolicited advice. At work, colleagues whispered behind her back, unsure whether to treat her as a victim or a spectacle. Even Alex struggled to adjust. He barely left the house, avoiding schoolmates who teased him relentlessly about the media coverage. Life as they knew it had been upended, replaced by a constant barrage of scrutiny and judgment. Meanwhile, the HOA dug in its heels, refusing to admit fault despite mounting evidence against them. Mr. Dawson, ever the staunch defender of the organization, held an impromptu press conference on the steps of the HOA office. Flanked by his fellow board members, he read a carefully worded statement claiming that their actions were in the best interest of the community. He insisted that the taser incident was an isolated event, a regrettable overreaction rather than a reflection of the HOA's overall mission. But his words rang hollow to many residents who had grown increasingly disillusioned with the board's leadership. Public opinion within Willow Creek began to shift dramatically. For years, the HOA had operated under a veil of authority, its decisions rarely questioned by those who feared retaliation. But now cracks in its foundation were exposed for all to see. Neighbors started sharing stories of intimidation, tales of fines levied for minor infractions, threats made during heated meetings, and even instances where homes were vandalized after disputes with the board. These accounts painted a troubling picture of an organization more interested in control than cooperation. One such story came from Mrs. Harper, a retired teacher who lived 2 streets over. She recounted how the HOA had fined her repeatedly for having flower pots that were deemed too colorful for the neighborhood aesthetic. When she refused to pay, they sent letters threatening legal action. Another neighbor, Mr. Patel, revealed that he'd been pressured into replacing his perfectly functional mailbox because it didn't match the HOA-approved design. It felt like living under a dictatorship, he told a local reporter. You couldn't breathe without someone watching you. As these stories surfaced, public sentiment turned sharply against the HOA. Petitions calling for reform gained thousands of signatures, and protests erupted outside the board's headquarters. Residents demanded transparency, accountability, and ultimately the dissolution of the current leadership. Some even suggested abolishing the HOA altogether, arguing that its rigid rules stifled creativity and fostered resentment among neighbors. The once unified community was now fractured, with tensions running higher than ever before. In response, federal investigators intensified their probe into the HOA's conduct. Documents were subpoenaed, emails reviewed, and financial records scrutinized. What they uncovered shocked even the most cynical critics. Emails revealed discussions about targeting specific households for arbitrary violations, often based on personal vendettas rather than legitimate concerns. Financial records showed mismanagement of funds, with large sums allocated to frivolous projects while necessary repairs went ignored. One particularly damning memo outlined plans to use surveillance cameras installed throughout the neighborhood, not just for security purposes, but to monitor residents' compliance with HOA rules. These revelations sparked outrage nationwide, turning the Willow Creek scandal into a symbol of unchecked power gone awry. Talk shows debated the ethics of homeowners associations, while op-eds called for stricter regulations to prevent similar abuses elsewhere. Social media lit up with hashtags like #ADINIR Justice for Carter Family and Reform HOAs, amplifying the voices of those demanding change. For many, the case highlighted broader issues about governance, privacy, and the balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility. Amidst the chaos, Dr. Carter remained steadfast. She attended town hall meetings, fielded interviews, and met with lawyers to strategize her lawsuit. Her goal wasn't revenge, it was justice. She wanted to ensure that no family would have to endure what hers had gone through. Yet, even as she fought tirelessly, she couldn't ignore the toll it took on her and Alex. Late at night, when the house was finally quiet, she would sit by the window, staring out at the street below. The sense of safety she once cherished was gone, replaced by a lingering unease. Alex, too, bore the weight of the ordeal. Though he tried to put on a brave face, the teasing at school wore him down. Friends he thought he could trust distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the attention surrounding his family. He spent hours locked in his room, scrolling through social media posts about the scandal. Sometimes he wondered if moving to Willow Creek had been a mistake. His mom reassured him that things would get better, but deep down, he wasn't so sure. Despite the challenges, there were moments of hope. Neighbors who had long been silent began speaking out, forming alliances to challenge the HOA's dominance. A grassroots movement emerged, advocating for a new system of governance, one built on collaboration rather than coercion. Community meetings drew record attendance, with residents voicing their frustrations openly for the first time. Slowly, but surely the tide was turning. Even Mrs. Peterson, whose initial 911 call had set everything in motion, found herself rethinking her role in the drama. In a heartfelt Facebook post, she apologized to Dr. Carter and Alex, acknowledging that her actions had spiraled out of control. "I thought I was helping," she wrote, "but I realize now that my fear got the better of me. I'm sorry for the pain this has caused." Her apology sparked mixed reactions. Some praised her honesty while others dismissed it as too little, too late. But it marked a turning point in the narrative. As weeks turned into months, the legal battle loomed large. Federal charges were filed against several HOA members, including Mr. Dawson and the woman who wielded the taser. They faced allegations ranging from criminal negligence to assault, with potential penalties that included hefty fines and jail time. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter's $5 million lawsuit moved forward, promising to expose even more skeletons in the HOA's closet. Through it all, one thing became clear. Willow Creek would never be the same again. The idyllic image of perfection that residents once clung to had been shattered, revealing the flaws beneath the surface. But perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. In confronting the truth about their community, residents had taken the first step toward healing and rebuilding something stronger, fairer, and more compassionate. For Dr. Carter, the road ahead was uncertain, but she held on to hope. After all, sometimes it takes darkness to reveal the light. The legal battle that followed the shocking events on Maple Lane transformed Willow Creek into a battleground of ideologies, emotions, and principles. It wasn't just about one family or one incident anymore. It was a fight for accountability, justice, and the soul of an entire community. As federal investigators continued their probe into the HOA's conduct, lawyers on both sides prepared for what promised to be one of the most high-profile cases in recent memory. The courtroom drama captivated not only the residents of Willow Creek but also people across the country, who followed every twist and turn with bated breath. Dr. Emily Carter's lawsuit against the HOA became the centerpiece of the legal proceedings. Filed shortly after the incident, the $5 million claim alleged emotional distress, defamation, and endangerment of her family. Her attorneys argued that the HOA's reckless actions had caused irreparable harm, not just to Dr. Carter and Alex, but to the fabric of trust within the neighborhood itself. They painted a vivid picture of a powerful organization run amok, using its authority to intimidate and control rather than protect and serve. For Dr. Carter, the lawsuit was personal. She wanted answers, restitution, and a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. But more importantly, she wanted to send a message. No institution should wield unchecked power over individuals' lives. On the other side, the HOA mounted a fierce defense. Their lawyers portrayed the board members as well-meaning volunteers caught in an unfortunate misunderstanding. They argued that the 911 call from Mrs. Peterson was made out of genuine concern for Alex's safety, and that the paramedic's injury was an unintended consequence of a chaotic situation. They also claimed that the HOA's rules were designed to preserve property values and maintain order, not to oppress residents. To bolster their case, they presented testimonials from longtime neighbors who praised the HOA for keeping Willow Creek beautiful and crime-free. But these defenses rang hollow to many who had grown disillusioned with the HOA's tactics. Former members came forward during pretrial depositions, shedding light on years of questionable practices hidden beneath the surface. One whistleblower revealed that the HOA kept secret dossiers on every household, documenting everything from late-night parties to political affiliations. Another testified that fines were often used as a tool to silence dissenters, with some families forced to pay thousands of dollars for minor infractions like planting unapproved flowers or leaving trash cans visible from the street. These revelations painted a chilling portrait of an organization obsessed with control, willing to cross ethical boundaries to enforce its will. As evidence piled up, public opinion swung decisively in favor of Dr. Carter. Social media buzzed, with hashtags like #Nadir Accountability for HOA and #Wire Justice for Alex, amplifying calls for reform. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse each day, holding signs that read, "Enough is enough and our homes are rules." Even national news outlets picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority. The HOA, once seen as a guardian of suburban perfection, now appeared as a symbol of abuse and overreach. Inside the courtroom, tension simmered as witnesses took the stand. Paramedics recounted the harrowing moment when the taser was fired, describing how their colleague collapsed in agony while trying to do his job. Neighbors spoke candidly about the fear and frustration they'd felt under the HOA's watchful eye. One woman tearfully described how she was fined $500 for painting her front door a shade of blue, slightly darker than the approved color palette. Another man recalled being threatened with eviction after refusing to remove a small vegetable garden from his backyard. Each testimony added another layer to the narrative, exposing the human cost of living under such rigid governance. Perhaps the most explosive revelation came when emails between HOA board members were entered into evidence. In one exchange, Mr. Dawson referred to certain households as problematic and suggested ways to make them comply. Another email outlined a plan to install additional surveillance cameras near homes known to flout HOA rules. The language used was cold and calculating, devoid of empathy or compassion. When these documents were read aloud in court, gasps filled the room. Even the judge seemed taken aback, pausing briefly before instructing the jury to focus solely on the facts. Throughout the trial, Dr. Carter remained composed, though the stress was evident in her tired eyes and weary demeanor. She attended every session, sitting quietly beside her lawyers as witness after witness recounted stories of intimidation and injustice. Alex accompanied her when he could, though the scrutiny proved too much for him at times. He avoided reporters' questions and kept his head down, acutely aware of the spotlight trained on his family. Despite the hardships, Dr. Carter refused to back down. She knew this wasn't just about her. It was about setting a precedent, ensuring that no other family would face similar treatment. Meanwhile, the HOA board members faced mounting pressure. Some resigned quietly, unable to withstand the public backlash. Others doubled down, insisting that their intentions were noble even if their methods were flawed. Mr. Dawson, ever defiant, gave interviews defending the organization's legacy. "We're not perfect," he admitted in one televised segment, "but we've always acted in good faith doing what we thought was best for Willow Creek." His words did little to sway skeptics, however, especially as more damning evidence surfaced. As the trial dragged on, cracks began to form within the HOA itself. Internal disputes erupted over strategy, with some members advocating for a settlement to avoid further embarrassment, while others pushed for an all-out legal fight. Financial strain compounded the discord. Mounting legal fees drained the organization's coffers, leaving little money for essential services like road maintenance and park upkeep. Residents grew frustrated, complaining about potholes and overgrown grass, ironically the very issues the HOA was supposed to prevent. Despite the turmoil, the trial reached a crescendo as closing arguments approached. Dr. Carter's attorney delivered a passionate speech, urging the jury to consider the broader implications of their decision. "This isn't just about one family," he said, his voice steady but forceful. "It's about whether we allow institutions to operate above the law, unchecked and unaccountable. If we don't hold them responsible today, what message does that send for tomorrow?" The HOA's lawyer countered with a plea for leniency, arguing that mistakes had been made but emphasizing the board's commitment to improving. "Let us learn from this experience," he implored, gesturing toward the defendants seated behind him. "Give us the opportunity to rebuild trust and restore harmony to Willow Creek." When the jury finally retired to deliberate, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Reporters scribbled notes furiously while spectators exchanged whispers and theories. Outside, crowds gathered, holding banners and chanting slogans. Everyone waited anxiously for the verdict, knowing it would shape the future of the community, and perhaps serve as a turning point for homeowners associations everywhere. For Dr. Carter, the wait was agonizing. She spent hours pacing her living room, replaying the trial in her mind. Would justice prevail? Or would the HOA escape accountability yet again? Whatever the outcome, she vowed to keep fighting, not just for herself and Alex, but for everyone who deserved to live free from fear and intimidation. The stakes couldn't have been higher, but Dr. Carter stood firm, ready to face whatever lay ahead.